Next myth. ADHD is a deficit. ADHD is a disorder. What's the reality?
So this one is interesting because both of those words are part of the actual diagnosis. But the reason we want to talk about those as a myth is because really it is a misleading diagnosis, because it's not a deficit of attention, first of all. Like we just talked about, if someone with ADHD is doing something they enjoy, then they can even become hyper-focused, what Betsy said, which really is when they get so engaged that it's hard to pull them away from it. And so clearly they can focus. They're not lacking that ability. It's just more of a difficulty controlling it and being able to shift attention whenever you need to shift it to something that you don't want to be doing. So it's not a deficit. The other term, which is disorder, I also don't like that term, only because what we know now is it really is a difference. It's a difference in the brain.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's a bad difference. It shouldn't necessarily be viewed as something wrong with a person. It's just a difference, and that difference comes with both some challenges, but it also comes with a lot of strengths that we'll be talking about. And it's really important for everybody to see it that way, that it is a difference, and for us to talk to kids about it that way.
I agree. And there's actually two different types of attention. There's selective and divided. And so you'll see those kids that hyper-focus, and this is just about focus itself, the cognitive side of it. But selective attention, we joke that it's, kind of our husbands when they're watching a game and they're hyper-focused on the game, and you can say, "There's a fire!" and they're like just watching the game.
You're like, right, okay.
Yeah, whatever. Or divided attention, that's multitasking. That's doing several things at one time, or being able to carry a baby and do the type whatever and cook dinner and whatever else.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what's going on with your child.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to share that's kind of a similar thing is GT.
Yeah.
You're gifted and talented. Gifted and talented actually originally was a special ed program. Now we all want our kids in GT. Well, true GT, those kids they think outside the box. They don't think like everybody else. And so you need a program that helps them. That doesn't mean that every child that is smart has to be GT. Actually, not at all. There's some kids that are your high achievers that can do beautifully in a regular classroom.
Right.
But then you also have your kids that think outside the box, that need a different way of learning and being taught. And that's the same thing with attention deficit.
Exactly. That's the similarity between kids who are identified as GT and kids who are identified as ADHD, is that they just have a different learning style.
Right.
They need to learn in a different way, and we need to approach things with them in a different way.
Right.
And it's helpful to understand that about them.
And sometimes it's not even teaching them in a different way, kind of like GT. It's having your classroom set up or allowing them opportunities to do things in a different way. If you've got one who's a fidgeter or who moves, giving them that opportunity. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but it could just be how you handle that child within the classroom, not necessarily how you teach that child in the classroom.
Right, exactly.
So
we have a couple of slides just to show you guys a little bit more about some of the positives of ADHD and having an ADHD brain, because there are so many positives that people don't often talk about or focus on, and I think we should, because like we said, it is just a difference, and it's a difference that can be a really incredible, amazing thing if you learn how to harness it, right? And so one of the slides that we're showing you is a picture of a sun that has all kinds of positive qualities that we know are associated with having an ADHD brain. But some of the big things that I wanted to point out that we found is that individuals with this type of brain oftentimes have advanced motor abilities, because the motor cortex of the brain may develop a little bit faster. They tend to be very visual thinkers in many cases, because that part of the brain is functioning very well. They tend to be very creative, out-of-the-box thinkers, like you said, and coming up with really interesting, cool ideas. Oftentimes they're risk takers, which can be a really awesome thing. And then another thing is high energy, and then the focus. So we talked about focus sometimes being a problem, but that hyper focus can actually be an amazing skill. It's almost like a superpower if you can use that to your advantage, and you can hyper focus on something that you really enjoy, then that can actually lead to your success. And that has led to a lot of success for a lot of very, very well-known successful people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not all, but most CEOs, most entrepreneurs, those that are inventors, tend to have some form of ADD, ADHD. It's like you said, they're so creative. They think outside the box. When it looks like they're daydreaming, their brain is going a mile a minute. They're probably thinking of the next, I don't know, in the next big thing, an invention. So,
yeah, and we have a slide to show you a lot of some of the most famous, greatest minds of our time have been either diagnosed with ADHD or thought to have had ADHD based on some of their characteristics. And a lot of really successful people actually attribute their success to some of these characteristics of their brain. And so if you think about some of those things we talked about, some of those strengths they can be kind of prerequisites to being a CEO or an entrepreneur, like being a risk taker, high energy, someone who thinks outside of the box and who is creative and innovative. I mean, those are things you kind of have to be if you're going to start your own business or be or really pursue something and be very, very successful. And so actually there's even statistics showing that people with ADHD are, I think, somewhere along the lines of 400 times more likely to start their own business. And that's something I see in the clinic all the time when I work with adults with ADHD. Oftentimes they have their own business and they've come up with some really incredible ideas. And oftentimes very, very gifted and very talented, bright people.
They're usually really, really bright. So if we can get them through school and to become adults where, because in school you have to follow certain things. You have to do math this way, and you have to do the Englishes to finish and histories and so on and so forth. But once they're out and they find the career they really enjoy, there goes back to that, you do what you love, you love what you do, you're going to see there's no limits to what they can do. I mean, it's amazing to see.